The Florida Panthers reign supreme in the East once again. And before we head out west for the Western Breakdown, we're taking a look at how these Florida Panthers did it once again. Thank you for joining us for the Monday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Let's take a look at these cats.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's Gemini season, baby, and the Stanley Cup is oh so close to being in the building. And thank you so much for joining us for the latest episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Steele and Flip. Shout out to the everydayers holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. We see and appreciate that, and we couldn't be doing this without y'all. Couldn't be doing it without FanDuel Sportsbook. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get 150 bones in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Well, Mr. Roden, we are here once again with this Florida Panthers team, and not like we weren't giving them any respect already, but they have once again proven that they are the best team in the Eastern Conference by taking out and dismantling a very good New York Rangers team. Let's talk about a number of different angles from Paul Maurice, Gustav Forsling. Where was Mika Zibanejad? I got to throw some love at Shesterkin in the cage. I got a lot of things to say. I know you do as well. We got fantasy angles to cover. Tomorrow's episode, we don't know what happened out west on Sunday night. However, all week long, even your boy will be here solo at the end of the week, breaking down all the news that you guys need. So make sure you're tapped right in. However, Steele, I know you've been watching this Rangers team very closely. Where's your first gripe? What are you seeing? Obviously, kudos due to the Florida Panthers. But where did that offense and power play go from this New York Rangers team? You're on mute again. Giddy up. Gemini season, baby.
Gemini season, hey, it's early on Sunday morning. There's a lot to talk about. We're going to get into all of it. But first, we got to give a shout out to my boy Flip Livingstone over here. Happy birthday to him. It's birthday. It's Gemini season. Absolutely appreciate you, man. Happy birthday. Love you, brother. Got to give a shout out to my co-host over there. So
appreciate you.
Happy birthday. 50th birthday for Flip. Am I correct?
50 years young. I got a couple up on Mark Giordano, but I'm feeling good for 50. But no, all jokes aside, I appreciate you, pal. Appreciate that love. Shout out to everyone out there holding me down. My wife, Jill, for sure, and the whole squad. But yeah, this Florida squad, over to you, pal, because I'm very, very impressed. And there are some angles here that need to be discussed.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. And I want to talk about Sam Bennett and Gustav Forsling. You mentioned Gustav Forsling. Those guys have been absolutely incredible. You know, this entire team deserves so much love and deserves so much credit for what they do. Back-to-back years going to the Stanley Cup Finals. And honestly, again, Sam Bennett that I mentioned in the first round series against the Tampa Bay Lightning was going to be an X factor. He has 10 points in 12 games. He gets a huge, probably the craziest, most spectacular goal that we've seen all playoffs long, with just like that. It was just a rocket of a shot, post crossbar and in. Gets them on the board, first one of the game. So Sam Bennett got to deserve a lot of love. Gustav Forsling, 11 points, a plus 11 in 17 games. He's been so good for them since signing that contract. That contract is going to be one of the most underrated amongst defensemen in the NHL right now. So they are set right now with him being locked up for the next 5-6 years, for however long his contract is. But I really do believe a lot of this credit has to go to Paul Maurice.
Of course.
Paul Maurice knows how to get every single player invested, because you're going to get the best out of Matthew Tkachuk. You're going to get your best out of Barkov. You're hoping that you get Aaron Ekblad and Brandon Montour's best on a nightly basis as well. But he can get every single player in that locker room, every single player in that dressing room, and every single player on that bench invested into every single shift. No matter what type of player you are battling, you're working hard, you're digging deep, you're forechecking into the corners, you are hard on the puck. So my takeaway really from this is, of course, the Florida Panthers, Bobrovsky, all the top dogs on the ice deserve the love, deserve the credit. Paul Maurice deserves more credit than all of them, in my opinion, because he has been such a fantastic coach. He's been one of the greats over the last decade, over the last few years. And it's just been incredible to watch him. So I got to show the Florida Panthers a lot of love, because I've taken them I've taken the other team 2 out of 3 of these series now in the postseason. They continue to prove me wrong, and they have been and are going to be one of the most elite teams for a long time.
We both had Rangers. I think I had them in 7. I'm not sure how many games you had them in, but we were obviously behind the wrong team. And it's not to take anything away from the New York Rangers, and we'll get to that side of things in a second, because that power play disappeared, Steele. They were the 3rd best power play during the regular season, and that's just not going to be good enough. Not when you have the Florida Panthers absolutely smothering their attack. And I'm looking at Gustav Forsling. I'm also looking at some of these players that were brought in, the Nico Mikolas of the world, Evan Rodrigues, even Vladimir Tarasenko.
Yeah.
So it's in the same vein as your credit. It's due to Bill Zito, who said he was going to do nothing at the deadline, and then he went out there and got Tarasenko. And I know that was Tarasenko's first goal of the entire series, but does it really matter when it comes in that kind of fashion and how big it is? I'm with you. I don't think it does. So Bill Zito deserves some credit too. And you mentioned Paul Maurice. I don't know if you saw this, Steele. Nico Mikkola was on the ice for the end of that game. A series clinching Eastern Conference final game. Nico Mikkola has come out of nowhere. He's one of those players, Steele, that you and I had talked about fantasy-wise this year as the perfect kind of week-to-week flyer who chips in with a bit of offense. He fills out the categories decently. He's going to be a nice sleeper pick headed into next season, because this Florida team is going to run it back next time. We don't know what's going to happen in the final, but I just had to come out here, number one, and say Bill Zito brings in those smaller names in Rodrigues in the offseason, and the other pieces I mentioned in Mikkola, and then at the deadline in Tarasenko. He deserves some love too, and you said it about Paul Maurice. My goodness, this is one of the best coaches we've seen do it of my time watching hockey as a grown-up, Steele, and even though it is up there into the 50s now, Paul Maurice is one of the best to do it, and he is absolutely getting the most out of his team. And that shutdown pairing of Forsling and Ekblad, that's what I want to wrap up this segment at. We'll go to break. We can come back with whatever you want to talk about, and I actually want to pick your brain on who does this Florida Panthers team want to see and who do they match up better against? Let's talk about that as well. But let me leave it at this. Forsling and Ekblad didn't just shut down the Kreider Zibanejad line, which they did. Mika Zibanejad went goalless in the entire series, and he's gone goalless in 10 games, Steele. That's the longest goalless streak in Mika Zibanejad's career since 2021. So he went ghost, but Forsling and Ekblad absolutely shut them down, and I just wanted to give them credit because they also did that to Nikita Kucherov in the first round, and last round, David Pastrnak had nowhere to go because of those two, and they deserve a lot of love on the back end.
A lot of love indeed. I mean, just the way Gustav Forsling has been able to elevate his game in the postseason. Again, we know Aaron Ekblad is going to do what he does best on a nightly basis. You know, again, sometimes he has an off night, but Gustav Forsling has been very impressive. The fact that he's jumping up in the plays, he's jumping up on the rush. He's
43
not just
shots on net this playoff, Steele.
Yeah, he is going to be a sought after guy in fantasy hockey leagues next year. So I absolutely love what we've seen from Gustav Forsling, just taking that gear to another level and really jumping in the play, not being afraid to jump in the rush, put the shots on net, and use his skill set that we really haven't seen to this point in his career. So he's going to be a sought after player in fantasy hockey leagues. Before we get to break, I just want to go back to your point about Vladimir Tarasenko. He has been one of the greatest pickups since the trade deadline as well. You know, Jake Gensel was fantastic, but even though he wasn't producing offensively like we've seen him do in the past, I mean, 6 points in 17 games, he's a +4. He does all the little things right too. He's blocking shots, he's joining the rush, he's going hard to the net. He's a physical player, and like you said, even though that was the first goal for him in this series, he's doing so much other things positively to positively impact his Florida Panthers team right now. And I mean, this group has bought into the system and the idea that Paul Maurice has set for them since last year when they were in the Stanley Cup Finals as well. They deserve to be there. They're back there for a reason, and they're one of the greatest teams right now in the NHL.
Most definitely. We'll continue to talk about them. What went wrong for the Rangers? Some more fantasy impact. Tomorrow's episode will be hopefully taking a look at what the Stanley Cup Final looks like, or we'll be breaking down more news from Dallas, Edmonton all week long. I'm going to be doing a little countdown at the end of this week. I'm going to be looking at some top 20 breakdowns for y'all, get you ready for fantasy draft season. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships also is what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time, or you get your money back, baby. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts at the prices you want, it's easy to make that car an MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review, and also go follow us on the new Instagram account, Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Bombard Flip with happy birthday messages on YouTube, on the Instagram account. He deserves it.
Allah.
So much love to this brother out here. He's been
Appreciate
absolutely
you.
killing it on Instagram. So appreciate everyone tuning in for today's Monday episode, covering the Florida Panthers, New York Rangers, Eastern Conference Finals. Of course, on tomorrow's episode, we're hoping to break down the Western Conference Finals and then tee up the Stanley Cup Finals between the Florida Panthers and whoever it is. But we shall see later tonight. Continuing the conversation though of the Eastern Conference Finals, let's go to the New York Rangers side of things right now. What went wrong from them? And you know, I think we're going to have a lot of the same points, but I just got to say that Igor Shesterkin deserves so much love right now. He deserves so much better than what he got in this Eastern Conference Finals. And just throwing these stats out, I don't know if I sent this to you last night or if you saw it, but Igor Shesterkin gave everything in this playoff run from the New York Rangers. Faced 524 shots in 16 games.
Wow.
He had a .926 save percentage, and the Rangers were outshot in 13 of 16 games in the playoffs. They were outshot and almost outbattled in a lot of those games. Even in the Carolina series, it seemed like things were going a little bit sideways for them, and especially in this Eastern Conference Finals against the Florida Panthers, they were getting outshot, out-hit, sometimes they were getting outblocked. They did pretty decent in that category, but power play just went absolutely down the sink, down the drain, and they couldn't find anything. So when you have Igor Shesterkin playing this great, and 5 out of 6 games, you can't score more than 2 goals, that is going to be a huge factor. I mean, again, we've seen a lot of low-scoring games, but 5 out of 6 of these of this Eastern Conference Finals, they couldn't score more than 2 goals, and that was a huge problem. Obviously, like we talked about, the power play was absolute doo-doo in this finals for them.
Yeah, actually, it's been bad the last round too, Steele. They went 1 for 15 on the power play in the conference final. So that's been 2 for 25 over their last 10 games.
That's been a huge factor in the last 2 series. I mean, they still won the second round series, but it was a huge factor in this one, even though with Igor Shesterkin playing his absolute heart out and being an absolute warrior, making the most incredible saves out there, they couldn't get it done. And who do you look at right now in this series when you go back to last year as well? You start looking at Artemi Panarin. His goal in the last minute, it was too little, too late. Mika Zibanejad, like you said, 10-game goalless drought. You know, Chris Kreider was hard to predict, but Vincent Trocheck was like the heart of the team in this series. And there's a lot going on. Also, Jacob Trouba, I don't know what was going on with him in this series, but the guy was headhunting. He was looking for the physical plays all the time, and he became I like Jacob Trouba as a defenseman. I think he is a very underrated defenseman. I think his contract is a little bit high still, but he's very underrated
valuable
defenseman.
fantasy piece for sure.
Valuable fantasy piece, but he became a defensive liability in this series. Too many times I saw him getting blown by on the wing, alongside the boards or going for the big hit, and he misses and he's in the wrong position. You know, you go back to the Sam Reinhart goal in overtime on the power play. He was absolutely lost in the sauce there. So same thing could be, if you look at the replay, same to be said on the Sam Bennett goal, the first goal of the game in this game 6 between the Panthers and Rangers. So I was very disappointed in Jacob Trouba's performance in this finals.
Back to your point on Shesterkin first and foremost, because I'm with you. And also all of these situations get exacerbated when you can't score goals. And the third best power play in the regular season, it's not like we didn't know they could do it. And the expectation is there. And when you hang your hat on special teams, here we go again, Steele, with me and banging this drum. and you can't get it done? This isn't rocket science. Had Igor Shesterkin not been that good, and shout out to Dan Rosen of the NHL Network for pointing this out, this series may have been over in 4, if not 5 games for certain. So shout out to Shesty, because also, Steele, to bring it back to fantasy very quickly for Shesterkin number 1. Given how he started last year, and I know he came on in the second half like a house of fire, and then he was sensational in the playoffs. Had he not done that, though, we might be looking at Shesterkin, especially if the Rangers didn't make it to the Eastern Conference Final, as one of those players that has been playing his way down the draft boards. However, after his second half and after how good he was in the playoffs, I'm fine with him being one of the first 2, or if he's not the third goalie off the board, people are mistaken. He's one of the best goalies in the NHL. The Rangers should also run back pretty much an Eastern Conference champion quality team once again next year. The main pieces will be there. So fantasy-wise, I think Shesterkin has really kind of solidified himself once again as one of the top 3 fantasy goalie options, in my opinion. It comes down to the lack of overall offense, and Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider only had 1 goal between them, and it was, I believe, a shorthanded goal for Chris Kreider this series. Obviously not good enough, but look into the shot attempts and the chances. The Panthers had 468 chances to the Rangers 372 in terms of shot attempts, They did not shoot the puck enough. They didn't even generate enough quality chances. And you already mentioned Artemi Panarin. 1 goal in garbage time, not like the game was out of hand. But that's just also not good enough, Steele. And all of these angles are going to be clear and they've been covered. But how about one that hasn't been discussed? The Florida Panthers outscored the Rangers 7-3 in the third period this series. They were not good enough in the third period either. And all of those things combined, I am surprised that this went as long as it did, because I think the Rangers, as much as you and I both said we didn't see the best from them over the first couple of games there, we didn't see the best from them maybe for the last couple of weeks. They've fallen off a little bit, Steele. Laviolette said they couldn't bust through the system of the Florida Panthers. That's Paul Maurice once again. But I don't know. Hit me with your take on that. Let's go to break, and we'll come back and talk a little bit about, I need to pick your brain. Who's better? Is it the Dallas Stars or Edmonton Oilers as an opponent for this Florida Panthers team?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think they just got worn down. Again, the aggressiveness and the attackness mindset of this Florida Panthers team, constantly being forechecked, constantly turning the puck over, and constantly just, no matter what, finishing your check, at least touching somebody at all times. They got worn down. And you could see Artemi Panarin a few times in the defensive end. He didn't want to have the puck on his stick because Carter Verhaeghe or Sam Bennett or Sam Reinhart was coming after him. Same goes for a couple more players on their offensive line, and some guys even on the blue line for the New York Rangers. So they got worn down, and you could see it in Game 6. They were a little bit afraid in the defensive end, carrying the puck along the boards, and because of how aggressive and how aggressive this Florida Panthers team was at all times. And Paul Maurice, the system that he has put in place for this team to continue to have success at this level on every single game. Because if you even go back to, every single game that the Florida Panthers have played in the postseason, even with all the losses they've had, it's not like it's been out of reach. It's not like it's ever been such a lopsided game. I think there was maybe one in the second round against the Boston Bruins where they won like 5-1 or 5-2 maybe. But even then it was like, the score was not what really showed us in that game. So Paul Maurice has got this team on lockdown right now. He's got Alexander Barkov on lockdown right now as well. So
I want to talk about him after the break.
They know better than what they did last year. They definitely show a little bit of redemption there, and they head back to the Stanley Cup Finals, awaiting, again, the Dallas Stars or the Edmonton Oilers. We are going to talk about that after the break. But this episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and anything you can think of. I don't know, Flip, who you're taking in the Stanley Cup Finals. We don't know what the Stanley Cup Finals is, but I might be leaning towards the Florida Panthers right now in that game, in that best of 7. But to make all those bets, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode of Flip and I. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning is when you can find our episodes. And again, thank you just so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. We really do appreciate it through the postseason, through the playoffs, and going into the off season, up all the way until the NHL draft coming up soon and free agency, of course. So,
Yes, sir.
Looking forward to that.
Going to be busy, Steele.
Going to be busy, but let's continue the conversation. Dallas Stars. Do you want to continue with the Florida Panthers, or you want to get over to the Stars and Oilers?
Let's just leave it at this, because I think maybe last episode or the episode before we talked about Alexander Barkov, Sasha Barkov, however you want to call him.
Yeah.
One of the best two-way forwards in the game, obviously, as the Selke Trophy winner this season.
Might be the best.
He's the best, and he just deserves a little bit more love. He's also winning faceoffs at almost a 54% clip this postseason. His giveaway takeaway ratio is obviously sensational. He also has 37 hits, 45 shots on net this postseason, Steele, in addition to 17 points, and how about most importantly, 3 game-winning goals. The El Capitan is getting it done for this Florida Panthers team, and I just needed to show him some love, because speaking of draft boards and moving up them, if he wasn't already right up there in the second round, maybe a third round, he shouldn't be around much after that. That might be a slip even after what we're seeing from him this season and this postseason. If he keeps going like that, Steele, because he shut a lot of the credit is going to the blue line for shutting down up front. Ekblad and Forsling, they're getting love. Sasha Barkov, Alexander Barkov, whatever you want to call him, was also a big reason that power play, that Zibanejad and Kreider were shut down. He was all over the ice, and he is one of the best players in the NHL, most definitely. And his team is now no Cup Final hangover for the Panthers, Steele, to wrap it up finally. I said that I was going to wrap it up. I'm going to wrap it up, I promise. Sometimes when a team goes to the Cup Final the year before, actually not sometimes, a lot of the times, and lose, there's that Cup hangover. And there is no Cup hangover for this Florida Panthers team. And again, I think Paul Maurice is probably right at the head of the reason for that.
Matthew Tkachuk said it after the game. He told everyone they'd be back, and they are back in the Stanley Cup Finals. And now they await one of the Dallas Stars or Edmonton Oilers. Oilers up 3-2, of course. This is going to be a very interesting game tonight. Obviously, we're recording on Sunday. This episode is published on Monday, but we don't know what's going to happen. So we're going to talk a little bit about it, obviously, because we don't know what has transpired yet, because that game is still 12 hours away or 10 hours away from us right now.
Yeah.
But, this team, Dallas Stars, Edmonton Oilers, Western Conference Finals, to answer your question from before about who I believe is better suited for the Florida Panthers, or, which team the Florida Panthers would rather have, I think the Florida Panthers would rather have the Edmonton Oilers. And as scary as, and maybe as twisted as that might sound, because it's Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, I just think when you look at when we were talking about Florida Panthers, Gustav Forsling and Aaron Ekblad were shutting them down. Chris Tanev and Esa Lindell have been shutting them down as well for the Dallas Stars for the most part. Besides game 5, where I think it was 5-2, 5 unanswered goals and 5-2.
Well, yeah, they've turned it around a bit here, Edmonton, but I'm here for what you're trying to get at.
And Chris Tanev has also got a little bit of an injured ankle right now, so that also might be a little bit of a liability. But I'm more looking at the goaltending right now. Who would you rather go up against, Stuart Skinner or Jake Ottinger?
Now I can agree with
Skinner.
Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, Steele, both of those teams are so good in both Edmonton and Dallas that we could probably sit here and make good cases for both. However, right now, the Edmonton Oilers, and not to talk too much about them because we'll get there tomorrow's episode, their penalty kill in this series against Dallas is perfect. 25 for 25. That is insane. And they've turned it around in a very big way over the last couple of games. And obviously that's running through a confident Stuart Skinner, number one. But number two, the two best players on the planet, and Evan Bouchard on the back end is really starting. If he wasn't impressing you for the first 2 rounds, which he should have, his shot and his ability. Did you see that stretch pass up the ice on that goal? I think it was to Draisaitl, and then Draisaitl fed it over to Nuge for the goal. That was 100+ foot pass. This guy can do it all, and Evan Bouchard is a wrinkle that I think they don't want to take on. So I would say my look, if I'm Florida Panthers, I'm Paul Maurice. I want to take on the Edmonton Oilers because as much as I want to take on the Dallas Stars. I don't want to take on the Edmonton Oilers because as much as the Dallas Stars bring that defensive brand of hockey, they don't have that elite upside of the Edmonton Oilers. So I would be taking on Dallas, but like I said, we could sit here and nitpick, and it's also very hard to tell when we don't know who has gone through. Because at this point, though, and we can agree on this one, all of the teams, even the New York Rangers who are now out of it, were all cup worthy. They were all very much worthy. You just have teams like the Florida Panthers just did, taking it to the next level. And I'm going to properly spit this out because now I'm thinking clearly again, Steele. It's been a bit of a birthday hangover. Speaking of hangovers, here we go. The Dallas Stars going up against the Florida Panthers would also be such a grind of a series that I think selfishly I do want it to be Edmonton and Florida. So hopefully we can see a little bit more offense because if it goes Dallas and Florida, Steele, we might be looking at 1-0, 2-1 for 7 straight games or something like that because those are two very defensively stingy clubs. I hope I made any sense there because I feel like I'm all over the map, but here we go.
No, that made plenty of sense, my friend.
Okay.
Don't worry, the birthday hangover is treating you well right now, so we appreciate but I agree with that. I mean, I do still think they would rather take on the Edmonton Oilers because of the goaltending. We see a lot more high-scoring games, a lot more high-scoring chances from the Florida Panthers side of things, just like they did to the New York Rangers. But again, we could go back and forth on this all day. We could be here for an hour long if we wanted to, but we're not going to do that.
Tune back in tomorrow. We'll talk more about it then.
We'll tune back in tomorrow. Western Conference Finals, maybe, depending on what the Edmonton Oilers are capable of doing. Can they shut it out and move on to the Stanley Cup Finals with the Florida Panthers? But you'll have to wait till then. Until then, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you go check out Locked On Sports Today's YouTube channel, and you can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. They're here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories with local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering every single league. So make sure you go subscribe to them. Also, continue to subscribe to this channel, and we appreciate all the love and support you show us for tuning in for today's episode. Have a great day out there. Good luck with all your bets tonight, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.